Okay, movement of truth.
Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Well, that worked out very, very well. So I want to welcome everybody to the teachings today. It's been an entirely wonderful experience so far. Thank you very much, Mark, for bringing us to this position.
Okay, great. You got rid of the side panels. We just see the main one.
Hey, and I want to thank MOSFEC for his special teaching, and I want to thank all the other knowledge seekers for their contributions. That's what makes this meeting so important. And it's only become even more important now because we see the phenomenal rise of the Brazilian community. They are plowing a new path in terms of bringing this knowledge to the world. And the one biggest way they've done it, something that Christopher Columbus failed to do, and that is to be able to find India. So the Brazilian community has crossed the Pacific Ocean and amalgamated with the Chinese community. And now that is a very, very strong group. And so we have a long way to go here in North America, but you know, we have only to follow in the jet stream. We don't have to plow the fields, so to speak, anymore. And then, of course, our knowledge seekers workshops are continuing. And the only reason I mention that is to timestamp this. This is the Keshe Foundation America Knowledge Team meeting of 2025. And this is part of the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. We are discussing basic inertia, and we open up a lot of cups. And today we're going to review the cup of life. My name is Alexander. I'm from Canada. It is January the 5th, 2025. And this is the Keshe Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. And we're just a part of the whole process. So welcome everybody. As I said, this is a continuation of the basic series. Last week we started with the ratio to understand that when we change things, there is a significance to those changes. And so what's going on with the cup of life? Well, we all know what the cup of life is, isn't it? Or so we think. And we're still stuck on the hesitancy highway because it's the lowest energy state, and it's a matter of convenience, isn't it? We also have some blockages, so we wonder who is in the way, or who is in whose way. And we need a good cup holder for our cups of life, don't we? So as we like to get into our vehicles, we see the new transmutation process taking shape. And we try and shine the light on our cup holders of life, because it's going to be a bumpy plasma highway. And these lights will illuminate your path. And as we can see, there are different cups of life, different sizes of cups of life. And so we need different sizes of cup holders as well. So this is one of the key reasons you don't want to drink and drive. When you hit those bumpy patches, you can spill things. So the only thing that we really want to spill here is we want to spill the information on how we're searching for outer space. Because life is the cup of light to the plasma highway, to our little piece of pie in the sky. And this little piece of pie is our grounding, is our gravitational construct. But there's a whole universe out there, and it's a bountiful space. And we're entitled to share. We're not entitled to own it. We're entitled to share in it, all of us. Because for some reason, when we look at the universe, we see this zodiac reference. It's a round pie, 12 pieces in the pie, each one is 30 degrees. So we have 360 degrees in a circle. And that divides nicely by 3. But the problem, of course, is that our little pie is 3 and a bit. So we're always fudging things. And so what we're seeing is a captured field. And we see that with our eyes. But some people, when they're blind, they can't see with their eyes. They have to see something else. Which means, interestingly enough, we have the whites of our eyes, we have a colored iris, and we have a black pupil. But the fact of the matter is, we have to look at it if we want to see it. And this becomes one of the biggest problems. I thought that was easy when I was young. But now, as I say, in hindsight, it's clearly very difficult. And that's because we can manipulate the light. So there's various ways to do that through diffraction, scattering, converging, focusing, refraction, reflection, and bending. And as we investigate these things, we have a greater knowledge of the books of Merentevakoli-Kesh, like in book number 1, how the universal order of creation of matter came together. And so we see 3 fields of matter plasma, antimatter plasma, and dark matter plasma, and how they come together and they create a mag-grav condition, but they come together as a form of light. And interestingly, in book number 2, we discussed the structure of the light. And since we have a structure, and if we have a connection with a light, that means there's a coming from and a going to. And interestingly, in book number 3, the origin of the universe, not only do we come to, but we come to split into 2. And how does that happen? Well, it's part of the creation, isn't it? So there's something missing here, because the coming together and splitting into 2 is opposite to the way we were born, because it's the coming together of 2 and then being born. And so the difference between the singularity and the duality, and of course, there's always the Trinity, and we try and put this together because for 359 weeks, Rick Kremen and the Universal Council have been trying to bring together the one planet, one nation, and one race for justice and world peace. And who is the judge and who is the jury and who makes the rules and what are the rules? And most of us have grown up with only 10 commandments. And now we realize that it's actually a case of 24 commandments, which is kind of interesting in numbers, because when we look at the plasma highway and we see it's a higher energy state, and the problem, as we said, we're in the lowest energy state. It's very comfortable. It's part of our transmission highway, and we have some phenomenal technology to be able to communicate on this transmission highway. So there was the radio, now there's the internet, and then of course there's that transition highway, which we don't seem to understand what happens when we don't have a radio or the internet, and how exactly do we communicate, and who called us to be born, and who's calling us after we leave, and who talks to us when we sleep at night and dream, and are these all parts of the transmutation highway? And so we try and ground ourselves in our little physicality, but when we look at the universe, we can't find any cornerstones. We find the color wheels, and we find the spheres, the planets, and the rotating fields. And then we see the vastness of the universe as far as we can see. Now, what we see is only what is shining on us, what is coming to us. And we see what is coming to us in the form of carbon. And we see the relationship and the ratios on the transmission level. It only seems as one field, but we have to understand that that is an inertia field, which is a coming together of two fields. And those two fields have a common denominator, and that common denominator is carbon-12. And so the carbon-12 is created from two fields, and these fields, because they're common, the ratio is 1:1. But when we go to the transition field, we see there's carbon-14 and carbon-10, and we look at the total is still 24, but the ratio has changed. It's 1.4:1. And then when we go to the transmutation energy state, we still see the same case of 24, carbon-16 plus carbon-8, but the ratio has significantly changed. It's now 2:1. And these seem like numeric changes, but what we know is that each change is an order of magnitude at least. So the ratios indicate a change in orders of magnitude, and therefore it's hard to see the difference. So we have to make these choices to see the relationship choices and how they work together. And we find that in a common understanding of the X, Y, and Z axis as being part of our transmission dimension, if we want to elevate into a higher dimension, we have to go through a transition. But that transition also has 3 dimensions of the X, Y, and Z axis to make it complete. And then when it goes somewhere, it goes to a transmutation dimension, which also has to have 3 dimensions, the X, Y, and Z axis. And so this only counts for the duality between the transmission and the transmutation. But we have to understand as we said, that there are three dimensions, the transmission, transition, and transmutation dimension. And so when we look at the matter state and we see the dark matter and the antimatter and the matter state and how they come together, and these are all different energy levels. But these energy levels, as they break up, we know that they are different. And yet, when we look at our tiny little perfect world, we have a combination of all three energy levels in our tiny perfect world. And that's pretty good. So we actually are sharing in the part of creation. And the reason we're able to do that is because when we look at the Keshe model of nuclear decay of the neutron, we see that the neutron, which is an initial fundamental plasma, breaks down into an atom. And that atom is a marriage of the proton and the electron, but the mass is not the same. And the difference in the mass is partially accounted for by the release of the PM ticks. And so these PM ticks have a singularity and they have an energy, but that energy is not visible. Come to think of it, nothing here is visible to the naked eye. So what we're seeing is more than what we're taking into account. And usually we take into account when we have two fields, we say, well, there's one field and then there's another field. And say 1 and 1 is equal to 2, but they're not the same. And the thing is, when they come together, they create a synergy. And so there's more than 2. And we're none of these 3 dimensions. We're an observer. And since we are observing from the point of our little pi, which is 3.14 and a bit and a bit and a bit, you know, we just kind of have to fudge things in terms of our understanding, because when we look at the energy transfer, there's a balance. And that balance is governed by the laws of conservation of energy. And so it becomes a conservation of MAGRAV energy transfer state, which means that we can have a balance not only across each state, let's say atomic state, nanostate, and GaN state, for instance, but let's say one side has the GaN state and the other side would manifest into the nanostate. So now we're talking about a transfer state that is transcending 2 different energy states. So if we can't measure this, or if we can't account for it chemically, then we have a problem. And then we come up with strange things like big bangs and stuff like that. But based on, you know, voodoo science, when we're looking at going from one to the other, we have to understand that it's part of the transition matter. And this transmission matter is a transition to go from one dimension to another dimension. And so there are 2 transition matters. The transfer state that goes from the transmission to the transition. And then there's another transfer state that goes from the transition to the transmutation. But we have to understand it's a 2-way street. And so we can go back in the other way. And so whichever way we're going, in order to maintain this containment, we have to have all 3 dimensions. So wherever we're going, and wherever are we going? Well, we are going someplace in the universe. And the way we're going is the way that the universe was created. And so the creation of the universe is the coming together and converging of these matter states, and we call them the antimatter, dark matter, and matter state. And they're always positive because energy is always positive. So the charge is not the positivity, the charge is the direction of motion. And this energy is always in motion because all things are working in combination. And if that energy were suddenly to stop and not be in motion, then either you would drop down in an energy state because the energy for that motion would drop down, and you would basically freeze in position. That's one option, which would make you exist. Or you could disappear, at which point you wouldn't exist. And so there's this range, and it's extreme. And when we bring these extreme ranges together, and if we only bring them together within our tiny perfect world, we find that we can create a conflict point, not understanding that this is a binding zone. And the reason it's a binding zone is because it follows the plasma rule, where the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. And so we don't like that rule as a rule. We like to have a point of conflict. Some people really enjoy it, but there are many of us who would prefer conflict resolution. And so this point of conflict only becomes a point of containment. And it's an important point because it's an energy binding point. And this binding point is a self-serving point. But we have grown accustomed to doing it at the expense of others. And I keep bringing this point up because it's a flaw in our society. We are getting this energy binding that we need for our self-serving purpose from the universe. Why do we need to steal it from others who likewise are also depending on this energy binding coming from the universe for self-serving purpose? And, you know, our society has really changed. And I don't want to talk about the ugly side of our society, but some of you may remember the music of decades ago, where we didn't have so-called knowledge seekers as we have today. We really had knowledge searchers, and the searchers wrote songs like Love Potion Number 9. And why is that? It was something that everybody wanted. It was something that was missing. This is the result of the emotion that was manifest through 2 world wars. And we were tired of it. And we're still tired of it, because we are made up of GANs. We are made of bags of GANs. And that GANs is in a field. And when you look in the middle of the field, you see there's a hole in our GANs. And we wonder, is there a hole in our soul? Or is there a soul in the hole? And so this becomes another point of conflict, but not so much a point of conflict as being a vanishing point, a point of convergence, a point of crossing over from 2 points of view. And so we have these relationship ratios between the scientific community and the spiritual community. And in order to make this balance, what we call a MAGRAV balance of magnetical and gravitational field forces, it's a kind of a balance between the awake state and the dream state, isn't it? And so, you know, what we say is the awake state is the scientific state, and what we say is the dream state is the spiritual state. But the plasma state is another aspect of the knowledge, and it brings the 2 states together. So the real question is, what rate of change? And so when we talk about bringing states together, and we talk about the cups of life, this is what we have to understand, that we created a gradient change. It's called a gradient charge, but it's an impetus to change. And so we have this nanocoding process of monatomic science interacting with the regular science and allowing us to impart an emotional strength. And this strength is manifested in the field. And then we see the result. And the result, of course, is GANs. And we get this GANs radiance manifestation, such as carbon dioxide, calcium, zinc, copper, water, amino acid, and even gold. And these are all various ganses that come together. And we didn't put the ganses in, we just created the environment, which is kind of the same thing that we are. We're bags of GANs. And so we are our own environment. And in that, we carry energy. And that energy comes and goes. And we have our own stacker system. We call it a spine. Well, some of us are spineless, but we are still dependent on a plasma feeding. And so this is something that we're wanting to impart to the world. And we bring all these fields together through the enhancement systems. And so we understand how the stacker system is created from a 5-cup system. And when we look at it very closely, we see that there's kind of a hierarchy, but they're different, and they're different in field strength. And that's the hierarchy, but not different in importance. The importance is equal right across the board. And what is that board? Well, so the first cup at the top is the cup of soul. And although all the cups kind of look the same and they bring their 3 dimensions together, clearly the cup of soul has a nanocoated zinc plate and 2 nanocoated zinc coils. And the result becomes a magnetical and gravitational balance field. And then, of course, we created the cup of emotion, and that was our first cup that we created. And it was a cup of necessity. It was part of the cup of the pandemic. But it wasn't a cup of pandemic, it was a cup of life. But we didn't call it the cup of life, we called it the cup of emotion because it's only part of our life. And so we had a zinc plate and a copper coil and a nanocoated copper coil. And we still had the magnetical and gravitational fields balancing. And then we went to the cup of physicality and we changed one thing. We now introduced a copper plate. So we still had the nanocoated copper coil and the copper coil. But now we enlisted the services of our physicality. And so when we look at the cups of life, we changed one component. But these components were 2 fields constituting our one field of life. And one field was the emotional first cup, and another field was the physical second cup. And then when we put those 2 fields together, we created the cup of man. Now, the thing about the cup of man, of course, is that this was an inertia cup of the 2 fields, the emotional and the physical cup. But we started off with the cup of soul. And so when we add the cup of soul to this combo, we now have 3 fields. And the 3 fields come together still as an inertia field. And so that becomes a more complete representation of our essence. But where are we? Well, we said the cup of soul combo is an inertia field. But then we have the cup of inertia. Oh, what is that? And so we see that if we nanocoat the copper coils and the copper plate, we create a cup of inertia. But this cup of inertia is supposed to be an amalgamation of two fields. Well, what are those two fields? So therefore, we had to have the cup of earth. And of course, the cup of earth introduces the nanocoated iron coil. And of course, it has a zinc coil that's also nanocoated, which is very emotional. And it has a copper plate, which is nanocoated, which is very physical. So isn't that interesting? The cup of the earth has an emotional and physical construct as well. And it creates a balance of magnetical gravitational fields. And, well, isn't that interesting? It has a soul as well. So that's very good. Now we have an inertia field created between our cup of soul combo and the cup of the earth. But there was another cup, the cup of the universe. And this cup of the universe was in our mind, in our head, in our brain. And one cup of the universe created from two parts of the brain. So really, the cup of the universe, as we were taught, is an inertia field of the left and right side of the brain. And so we see that we were able to create the zinc GANs, which is part of the emotional construct, the copper GANs, which is part of our physical construct, and then, of course, the carbogen, which is part of our amino acid construct, which is not only the construct of our physicality, but at the same time, it produces water. And of course, the key component of water is oxygen. And that becomes a very key component in all the ganses. So the oxygen being highly gravitational and the hydrogen being highly magnetical, we are able to create the ganses of the earth. And each of these ganses has the same characteristic. So we find that the ganses are actually one field created from two fields. So the cups of life, or call them the cups of the ganses, are all the cups of inertia. And these cups of inertia are based on Earth. But they're not all blended together. They're not all messed up. They're all in specific places. They can all be isolated. And when you isolate something, then you have to be very prejudicial in your selection. And so there was a determination that we could see by the number of protons. And that's how we organized our Earth space range details. But the thing about these ranges is that it doesn't account for where they came from. It only accounts for how they came together. In other words, they converged with the combination of the principal transition and convergence matter into a plasmagen, which at that point created a field. And then, of course, the Earth did the same thing. And then we have the field of the Earth and the field of ourselves and the field of the elements. And through field interaction, which we call inertia, the amalgamation of all of these fields creates an inertia field. But this inertia field is fed by the PM ticks. which by themselves, although the characteristic is magnetical, is magnetical in relationship to the MAGRAV inertia field that we have of ourselves, which is gravitational, which we have of the Earth, which is gravitational, and which we have of an inertia field, which is gravitational. And so if these PM ticks are magnetical, where's the gravitational for the PM ticks? And so now we understand that when we talk about matter, we're talking about either the feeding or the feedback plasma dimension. So both of them are a plasma dimension, but the difference is in the physical, you can touch it and see it, but in the plasmatic, you can't touch it and can't see it. Since we need the nearness and proximity to these fields, is part of the matter plasma dimension, which we occupy in our awake state, then every reference that we have is of this matter plasma dimension. And so we become feeding our understanding from a feedback position. So our feedback position is really nothing more than a regurgitation, which means that when we look at our matter state and how we're linked up with everything, and we say, well, with our knowledge, we can affirm our life. But if we're only looking at our matter state existence, and it's only looking at our tiny little perfect world, our little tiny piece of the pie, which really doesn't even add up because we always have to fudge things. So we're kind of denying life because it's not complete. It's like being satisfied with a finger when you know that you have a whole body. So it's not being greedy that you need your whole body. This is the affirmation of life. You do need your whole body because that's what you came with. So when we look at the color wheel and we see the various colors, we find that these colors come together on our computer screens and our TV screens, coming from the emission from red, green, and blue light gun, if you will. And so all these colors come together, and they're brilliant colors. But we ran into a problem because I'm not really sure how we got white. So the point being is that when we look at color, the color that is coming through our eyes, which we can see, is the emission light. And the color that we see in our physicality is the manifestation light. So what we see as part of the universe is the inertia feeding vision. And our soul is positioned at that crossroad. That crossroad is a crossover point, and it's the point of vanishing, because all the light coming together disappears and manifests itself in a physical reality. And this is the difference between our plasmatic reality and our physical reality, and it becomes a point of competition. And so we have a manifestation of a brain. And that brain is somehow interpreting all of this light that's coming in. Is the light only coming through the eyes? Or is it coming through a super granular layer that encapsulates our brain? And this layer is only 3 cells thick. And it has the ability to interpret the light coming from the universe and the light manifesting on this planet as an inertia field. And this super granular layer is not visible. And another thing that's not visible to most of us, of course, is the aura. Because the aura is a representation of the soul of physicality. And so when we look at the color wheel, we see that our emotions are encapsulated, but our emotions run a gamut of different emotions. And so these could be overlapping fields. So the couple of questions come up. If we can't see them, do they exist? Well, people who are clairvoyant can actually see them. So there is a skill set within the eyes that makes it capable to see them. And when you see them, of course, if we're talking physicality, then there has to be a color. And so the question then is, are we the same color all around? Kind of like our skin color, you know? We have different skin colors. And generally speaking, it's the same color all around. Is our aura the same way? Or are there parts of our aura that are different colors? And that throws a whole different light on the subject. Because each of these fields that we see are a combination field. And so as we see the emotional cup and the physical cup coming together, and they're both in the physical field, but the soul is in a higher energy state. And yet all three of those come together to be part of the soul of cup combo. And together they create a rotating field. And the reason this field rotates is because in order to maintain the energy within the field and to be incapable of stopping that energy, you have to corral it. And so that means you have to put a fence around that field and you have to lay down a track for that energy to flow. And then in order for that field to be maintained, you have a perimeter, but then you also have a center. And then you have a balance between what's inside the field and the perimeter of the field. And so, of course, that's based on density, isn't it? Because that's why the cows are inside the fence and there's just a natural sequence. And farmers seem to understand that, but not everybody seems to understand that. And not everyone seems to understand how important farmers are. Well, there is a gravitational confirmation because the hydrogen, which is fundamental to our existence, is a confirmation of the magnetic field forces of the sun, the earth, and the universe coming together magnetically. And so the arrival on earth is the gravitational arrival. And once it interacts with the field forces of the earth, it creates an inertia field, which is visible. And as such, that visible spectrum is a color spectrum, and it's unique. It's the fingerprint of hydrogen. Well, oxygen has the same, insofar as it has the same fingerprint, but it's different from hydrogen. It's a unique fingerprint. And it too is a gravitational conformation. And so these two have to come together and they produce the water, and that's why we are the water planet. But when we see light passing from the air into the water, we see a refraction, what we call a change in direction. And the change in direction is caused by the wave of the light passing from one medium to another, causing a change in the speed of the wave. So, for example, waves travel faster in deep water than in shallow water, which accounts for the curvature. But the light is constant. What changes is the wavelength to frequency ratio. And it is this change which allows the variability of the colors. So not only do we have the specific colors going from the infrared to the ultraviolet, but we also have a combination of colors. And so getting back to the RGB light that is emitted, we can see that when all the colors intermingle uniformly, that we actually get a white color. Well, that's not what we got when we blended all the paint together. And so we understand that this white color comes from the emission and the dark color comes from the absorption. And so we have to understand our point of view. And so it's the same thing like when we talk about a white collar. And we used to talk about the dirty ring around the collar. So, when it's time to wash the laundry, isn't it? And we really have to pay attention because it was really hard to get that ring around the collar clean. So one of the ways, of course, is to change the color. Well, even though we kept the white color, we created a green tie. Green is the midpoint between the black and the white. It's the midpoint between the blue and the red as well. Well, we could change the color. Now we have a blue color. Okay. So what is the blue color? If the white color is the amalgamation of all the light, what is the blue color? And so we find it's the same with our blue jeans, because that color is a reflection. It's an emission field. But that emission field is not blue. The blue jeans reflect blue. So they're every color except blue. And they're not green jeans either. So if we have a green color, what color is that? Well, like the blue jeans, they're not green jeans either. The color is a reflection. And so that reflection is what is not absorbed. So every color other than green is absorbed. And so what is absorbed becomes emitted. And so when we look at the vertical people and we see that the most common color of the vertical people is green, it means that they're not green. They're every color except green. So now we understand the problems with the greens. The greens become a binding point because that's the midpoint. It's the binding point between the black and the white. So, what is the intention? Well, it's not the crossover point, because the crossover point is the vanishing point. So the intention is actually an inertia field of the soul. The inertia field is the result. That's one inertia field. How do we manifest that inertia field into our physicality? So we have to understand what it means to have an agenda, because an agenda is based on intention. So what we hope is to have an objective conclusion of our intention. But the inertia field is a manifestation that is based on intention. And so that objective conclusion is now a subjective conclusion. So you have two opposite views, and when they come together, they cancel themselves. And that's why that crossover point is the vanishing point. So a lot of people like to go to a masquerade party. Well, humanity likes to masquerade in life as well. And it's not a party. So in Murtaugh's general practice, he identifies 7 masquerades. And they're identified as diagnoses that are commonly missed. And they include things like, oh yeah, depression, diabetes, drugs, anema, thyroid disorders, spinal dysfunction, and a urinary tract infection, for instance. And so we end up with this altered reality where we look at something and we bait and switch. Some people are very proud to have mastered this technique, but it creates a modified conclusion because it fabricates an altered inertia. So we kind of are living in an altered inertia, in an altered reality anyway, because we're ignoring the unseen, right? We're ignoring the hidden. Something is unseen, we can't see it, but something that's hidden, it was seen, but now it's not seen because it has been hidden. And then the worst of all is when we ignore the obvious. The nice, cute elephant toy there. So what is science? And there's a protocol. You do an experiment. Okay, so say for instance, there's this rainbow, and this rainbow has different colors in it. So what does it mean? So we write an abstract, and that's based on our intention. Our intention is to find out what does it mean. And so we run experiments. And of course, these experiments are based on our existing knowledge, and then we measure the results. And so these results, of course, are based on what we discovered. And from those discoveries, we arrive at a conclusion. But if that conclusion doesn't suit our agenda, then we have to do the bait and switch and make sure that the science is based on our agenda. So when we look at the cups of life, we kind of have a different problem, because we still go through the abstract based on intention and run the experiments. And this is also based on our existing knowledge. And then we analyze the results and we arrive at a conclusion based on what we discovered. And of course, we have to understand the discovery cannot be based on existing knowledge. You know, it's not like Christopher Columbus discovering India. He knows about India, but he makes a discovery. Well, he didn't discover America, he discovered India. So if you want to bait and switch your knowledge for discovery, then that's the conclusion you arrive at. But discovery is discovery. It's an addition to the knowledge, to the existing knowledge. So the conclusions have to be based on science. And so we understand that, you know, when we talk about spiritual things like crossing the bardo and understanding what our body is and what our physicality is, and is that what we are? Do we just litter the planet with our bodies here and then just leave? And when we look at the double rainbow and we say, okay, this is me and this is not me, and yet we see that there's a transcendence between the two dimensions. We see the feedback inside the rainbow, and we see the color spectrum going from the ultraviolet to the infrared. But on the outside rainbow, we see the color spectrum go from infrared to ultraviolet. And so that also becomes the feedback dimension. So the infrared in between becomes the dimension, transcendence, the transmission zone. And so it all becomes a point of view. And that point of view is the difference between whether we are seeing a rainbow, which is the emission of light coming to the planet and interacting in an inertia field, or it's a reflection as we can clearly see. There's a difference in direction. The relationship between the infrared to ultraviolet is reversed. So, dear scientists, what is your conclusion? Or are you just seeing things? So is it an affirmation of life or is it a denial of life? So are you seeing the real picture or are you seeing a hologram? Is that what life is? It's just an illusion, right? And so when you're looking at these double rainbows, make sure you know what you're looking at. And you can see the difference in the color, can't you, in between the rainbow? It's much darker than it is on both sides of the rainbow. So that convergence field becomes the matter plasma dimension. So that conversion field is a bringing together of two fields, the outside of the rainbow and the inside of the rainbow coming together. And so what is on the outside is the color of our skin, but what is the color of the inside? What is our true intention? And so that becomes part of our emission. And that becomes part of our aura. And so will the aura correspond to the color of our skin? Well, how can it be when one is in the plasmatic state and one is in the physical state? So this is what the transmission spectrum is. It's that tiny little spot, that point of containment, between the plasmatic interaction of the magnetical and gravitational fields. And so beyond that point of containment is one step beyond. But did we ask, well, what is beyond the one step beyond? And so if we can't see it, well, then that's, too bad. But what we do know is that we are all independent plasmatic variables. And so we all govern by the laws of conservation, which actually are the conservation of susceptibility, which is the relationship between the magnetical gravitational field forces on one side of the equation and the magnetical gravitational field forces on the other side of the equation. And that constitutes a maggrav. But, if we say that it's equal, and if we say that it's balanced, it doesn't mean that it's 50-50. What it means is that it's balanced in terms of equilibrium. But some things are visible and some things are not visible, and they have a relationship. And that relationship could be magnetical or gravitational. And so if it's there, if it's a plasmatic reality, and of course, if it's a physical reality, it has to have both a magnetical and gravitational field force. So when we look at the transmutation ratio quadrants, and we say, okay, well, the left side, which is acidic, and the right side, which is alkaline, and the upside, which is plasmatic, and the downside, which is physical. And then we can see these colors. If we're seeing the aura, that's the color of emission. And if we're seeing the color of the paint, that's the absorption. So now we understand what it exactly we're looking at. So when we talk about in the beginning, we see that the neutron came before the atom and the PM tick. So therefore, as the light came to the earth, it created all of these fields. And so what we see is every color that we're not. And this could be shocking to some people. So that what we call black people are every color except black. And white people are every color except white. But if the white is traveling in a rotating field, it's corralled within the fence, within that field. And that energy is a manifestation of an inertia field. Remembering that an inertia field is the combination of two fields. So what if that light has to take a different path, a convoluted path? So that light is still magnetical. But in order to take a convoluted path, it has to take it within a field of containment. And so it has farther to go. And it creates a binding. Well, that binding then creates a gravitational field. So now we have a magnetical and a gravitational field that is corralled. Now that area starts to be a little bit painful. And because it's now gravitational, and because it drew the energy to create this field, which we know is an inertia field, starts to create a throbbing pain. So that is not the way we were created. We were created without that throbbing pain. So we understand that the Earth space transmutation space was an amalgamation of two fields coming together in their highest integrity. And that integrity was transferred from the transmutation state of outer space, because you cannot go into outer space without integrity. So the transmutation space is the highest integrity. And so every other state, starting with the Magravs state in the atomic state, which is the physical state, or the monatomic state, graduating to the polyatomic state of the GAN state, to the field state of the plasma state. And these are all part of the matter state. But then we can go one step beyond. And how far do we go beyond? And this becomes a consideration within the field on the existence of the planet. But if we break through the Coulomb barrier on the other side, then we can go to an entirely different location. And so we demonstrated this in Sanya, where not only did we bring together a peaceful convergence of knowledge seekers, but we demonstrated the manifestation of a gold Gans. And so we always said, there's gold in them there are hills. Well, what happens if you take the manifestation of the gold Gans, which is an inertia field, isn't it? Just the same way we made the cups of life. So the Gans and the cups of life is an inertia field from what we did the construct. And so here we have the gold Gans, and that is a plasmatic inertia field. And then we created the gold itself, which is another inertia field. But this is an inertia field in the physical state. And you can see that there's a difference in the color. The gold Gans absorbs the light. The gold itself reflects the light. So we have choices. We can make our paths based on the path link and susceptibility. And so to understand that what we emit is our focal point of attention. And so through that focal point of attention, we then become an inertia field of retention. And it is that inertia field that becomes part of our emission. So our emission is everything that we are. And the color of our skin is what we are not. And so the path choice of path link and susceptibility is an inertia field that interacts to create the emission of intention. And now we can go beyond ultrasound, where we not only see the connection, we not only see the soul of the man, but we see the interaction of the soul of the man and the soul of the physicality. And isn't it interesting that we can see a fingerprint of the gravitational conformation of the emission spectrum? So now we understand that we have an antenna that is corresponding between whatever message is being feeding us and whatever message we are feeding back. And so we can tune this so that we can transcend where we have the selection of one force, which is magnetical and is balanced by the force selection of another gravitational force, right? So that results in the maggrav manifestation. So the emission of intention follows a standard folding deviation that leaves no room for war. The only way that we can do this is by cleaving this standard folding deviation. And that violates the universal laws. So the transmutation manifests in balance with the P stone. And now we understand between the plasma perception balance, where we talk about knowing and wisdom, how it can give you a deeper insight and the experience. Well, of course, that's going to change your perspective, isn't it? So it allows us to reflect on life. It allows us to determine what are we getting as a reflection and what was our emission of intention. And is it art? Is it organization? Or is it cooperation? Or is it just a hodgepodge? A discord, a betrayal? Yeah, we have choices. And so we have acidic and alkaline conditions, but we have to understand that the speed of rotation affects the transmutation transition. Regardless if it's in the physical state or the plasmatic state, because these are all overlapping fields and they follow the rules of the conservation of energy. And so we see the blue planet, right? So the speed of rotation transmutes in the micro and the macro. Why do they call us the blue planet? We are every color except blue. That's what we reflect. Our intention is every color, the pH of peace. There are many points in the field strength of the dove, and these are all inertia fields that we bring together, and they come together with integrity. And so this is part of the manifestation in the transmutation tests of nutrition and wellness. This month in January will be the third of a series of 3 in this transmutation test series. But the transmutation of time is going to require more research. And so we're all at the crossroads. And these crossroads are not really visible. We have to cross over and understand that we are what we intend, and that will be our manifestation in our inertia fields. And these inertia fields becomes part of our transmutation. So the range transition transcends the inertia field transmutation dimensions, and the laws of conservation govern and various fields. So the covalent field, which is an inertia field of two fields, the trivalent field, which is three fields, and the tetravalent bonding, which is four fields. And they all have attributes. And each of these attributes is a containment of inertia and is governed by ratios. So now we see that the soul of the man cannot be abandoned and cannot be compromised. And so the color of man is based on the integration with the soul of the man. So the color of the man is not the color he reflects, but is every color. This is the integrity of man. And so for 571 weeks in a row, we have been bringing together the inertia fields of the greater oneness to transcend the limitations of the nuclear science. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute teachings on plasma science. And so we're still welcoming all the beautiful knowledge seekers, and there's more and more coming every day, eager to learn about the new solution and the new selection process of the new plasma science. It's not really new. It's new to us. And there's a world peace treaty. We need to sign it, but sign it with intention, sign it with integrity, and sign it with our soul. And when we do that, then we sign it with the reality that we wish to create. And is man the reactor of a three-dimensional transcendent inertia? And we find that there are no straight lines through this field transmutation. And do we wonder if man can go into outer space without a peace dome? And so we look at our warmongering, and we can conclude we have never been into outer space. And is the inertia of the present governed by dimensions of history? How do we impart the transition of energy states of inertia? How do we do that? Well, the new year will bring mind-blowing changes to this physical transmission dimensions, and the plasma science needs to be delivered daily via the Peace Dome in exchange for peace on Earth. Welcome to the new outer space age and this new year of 2025. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed the trip.
Well, thank you, Alex. I do agree. We will become more enlightened in 2025 as we continue through the teachings, and hopefully our understanding gets deeper. Sometimes I feel the more you teach, the less I understand. But again, you have a vast knowledge, and I'm just trying to absorb and see what fits me. But you use so many terms today, I'm not sure. Let's see if the participants have any questions or would like to make a comment on what you've just shared with us. Mosfek, if you're ready, willing, and able to take over the screen and give us a short teaching of the, I'm not sure which one. Is it going to be on the magnets or the rope?
Both together, actually.
Oh, perfect.
So I'm going to share my screen.
Sure.
And so,
thank you for coming back. Sometimes people say they'll be back and we never hear from them. Thank you.
yeah, I could do that if you want me to do that.
No. Stay with us momentarily if you can, or as long as you need.
No,
And
then you'd be a
yeah.
Canadian.
Okay.
So here is the screen sharing. You can see it.
Yes, your screen is right there, and okay. We see a
So I
cylinder
will,
and an
there are,
oval. Yeah.
there are three things in this diagram. So the central one is the rope thing. We will come to that later. And then we have some magnet kind of things on the left. And let's start with the one at the bottom. So the one at the bottom is the one we will focus for the moment. And I am going to actually change the thickness of the line in the middle for a reason. This middle line that's thicker. I'm going to change the color. Let's change the color as well so that we can just see it better. So the blue line that's going through the center it's an wire through which we send electricity. So we'll start with the basic things about sending electrical form of energy. Now, in our books, if you look at the school books that kids read, we hear that the electricity goes through the wire, which is completely wrong. Electricity never goes through the wire. It's not electron flow. Electricity flow outside of the wire. This is basic electrical engineering, and some of the electrical engineers don't even know this part sometimes because they have learned the other one in school and they keep using that reference. And people don't. There is no, it's not explained very well, at least when I was in school. So anyway, so the wire, the electricity goes through the outside the wire. So this is one direction there is a flow, and this is our electricity that we know of. But for every flow in one direction, there is a reverse flow, which is the gravitational part, which in the electrical engineering, we call it.
Can we ask a question now, or
yeah,
before
go
I
ahead.
forget?
If you want to ask me a question,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, he
Okay,
was just asking about this field and the way it goes around the wire and how Ekmar had explained it, but I was hoping you would come in, Ike, and maybe Mosfet can provide a clearer understanding of your question if you're going to ask the similar question.
Yeah, yes, it's similar. So when you said electricity goes around outside the wire, I
Yeah.
assume the wire is the one in the middle.
Yes.
Okay, so if it goes outside the wire, would you say it's the same way we have aura around our body?
It's a field flow. Think of it as a field flow. Field does not, the surface has the least amount of resistance. Inside the wire, you have more resistance because of the molecular structure or the structure of the wire. So you see, when you open up electrical wires, you see lots of little strands. What does the little strands? Thin strands of lots of thin strands, not a single piece of wire. Copper. The thin strands are there to increase the surface area or the current capacity of the wire. So when you have many thin strands, the surface is a lot bigger, and so the transfer capacity goes up. So that's the basic. It's a very basic thing. But our school books still they're wrong. And then we have so that flows outside the wire because of that, because it wants a path that's easy to flow on. So essentially the wire gives think of it as I don't want to go into microwave, but the wire acts as a guide for the field to flow. It's not like no electron is flowing when the electricity flows. This is fundamental, I mean,
Mhm. You know, a
misrepresentation.
question I had, MOSFEC, was how come if I put my hand around this wire, I don't get a shock, but if I touch the wire, I get a shock? You're saying no electricity flows through the wire.
So do you touch inside the wire or outside the wire? Where do you touch the wire?
Well, I'm just saying if I put my hand on the electrical wire that's connecting the plug, I'll probably get a shock. But if I put my hand outside, you're saying this magnetic field is traveling. I don't.
No, I'm talking about the electricity flowing. I haven't come to the magnetic field yet. I'm
Okay,
just talking
okay. Thank you.
basic flow. And then, that comes later. And I mean, I'm talking about the flow that's magnetical going away from the origin point, which is the plug, let's say. And the red arrow is the gravitational flow coming back, which in electrical engineering, we call it eddy current.
Are they both equal?
No.
Okay.
We don't really know because our formulas don't have it, because they ignore it. It's too little. Actually, it's not too little, but this is the thing. So even, in the lab, the experiments we do, our results don't match the formulas we're given because of this eddy current. In electrical engineering, we call it eddy current. In mechanical engineering, we call it back EMF or back electromotive force. So this is the gravitational component, which is ignored, which is also ignored in the Maxwell's equation on electromagnetics. So, it goes everywhere. This is one of the, things that have been left out of our teachings in schools. It doesn't matter which university you go to, it doesn't exist.
So was this knowledge purposely left out, or is it because they didn't understand?
It is purposely left out. If you look at, Einstein's general theory of relativity, their derivation of it, and the assumption behind it, he uses two assumptions based on two. One is an experiment of Michelson-Morley, and then the other one is the Lorentz Fitzgerald's equation. But one assumes that ether exists, or a fluidic medium exists. The other one says that it doesn't exist. And those two are used to derive the formula, the general theory of relativity. How can that be correct if you are starting with contradictory assumptions and integrating the two? I looked at it and it's so, unbelievable. But anyway, so the medium or the what is called ether, or now we know it to be the magnetic field. So once you create a flow in this field, there is a circular flow in the direction that I pointed with an arrow going down, which is the circle, that cylindrical form that forms. That's the magnetic field that forms once the current flows through the wire. It's a very basic understanding, and this is known. This is known that the magnetic field forms around the wire. What is unknown is the gravitational component. What does that do? Actually, gravitational component creates, I'll also draw something else here. The gravitational field creates the other component, which is, I don't know, one square, I want a circle. It actually creates an opposite motion, which would be, let's make it red. So now we have opposite flow going in the other direction. Add an arrow to it. No, the other way. No. Why am I getting the wrong one? Sorry about
No rush, no rush. You just take your time.
that.
We
Just
appreciate you being here.
Okay, all right. Let's see. I'll fix it in a different way. So, so the current is flowing. It's the field that is forming is in the opposite direction. So this is because of the gravitational flow, this is the red part is not there in our education. So there are two counter-rotating fields forming. One is the magnetical because of the magnetical component of the electricity flowing. Another is the eddy current that's flowing in the opposite direction, which is the gravitational component. So this is a very basic understanding which has been left out of from our education. But now we know that this is how it works. So this is a very fundamental thing in our understanding. Any flow, in any flow, whether it's going through a wire, creates this condition. Okay, go ahead.
Please, what is the circle, the red one? What is that?
That's because of the gravitational flow, it creates the rotating, when the electricity flows through the wire, there is in the orthogonal direction, there is a circular flow forming around it, which is the magnetical field.
Does that happen with the magnetical?
Magnetical field around it because of the electricity flow. Now, when there is an opposite flow, there is an opposite rotation happening. That's the red circle that I drew because of the opposite gravitational flow. Clear now?
Yes, thank you.
One is moving from left to right, and the other is moving from right to left, if I'm understanding your drawing.
And the black circle is indicating the magnetical magnetic field forming because of the magnetical flow, and the red circle is the opposite direction flow creating the magnetic field because of the gravitational flow. So there are two things happening, one going this way, one going one way, one going the other. And it is always the case. There is always a two-way communication going on in any field flow. So this is very fundamental. This is something we understand from plasma science. It is also applicable to our basic electricity, the wire that carries electricity everywhere in our home and everywhere else. So this is a very fundamental thing. So an opposite flow gets created. Now, let's go back. So this we understand now, more or less, this part at least. Now, when it comes to magnet, so we have the blue square that I have on the left is a magnet with north-south pole. Now, the gray one is just a piece of iron. So what does this magnet do? It induces the opposite pole, which is the opposite flow in a way. Opposite pole on this magnet, and that's why it gets attracted to each other. So this is something we know from magnetism, but we don't understand how magnet works. How does magnet work? Our science really don't talk about how magnet works. So,
well, there is a difference between matter state and plasma state.
Well, even in matter,
when matter flows to its original gravitational force, so from a proton, it flows also to a neutron, but also to an electron. That's on the outside of this plasma is gravitational. It picks up fields from the outer barrier. But
I'm not.
when
I'm
you
not
see
what
when a proton goes to a neutron, it always creates resistance. That's why, like I said in the Chernobyl expression, in the graphite, you have a hexagon with hydrogen spikes on it.
Excuse me. I'm trying to. I mean, I'm not sure what you're trying to say. I'm not understanding it. So,
Because a neutron is on energy level, and energy level is always
Excuse me.
attracting.
Excuse me. I'm not following you. Please. What are you trying to? What are you talking about? I'm not following you at all. I mean, so
When you have a field, like when you say the field flowing from one direction to another, it's going out like the rays of the sun. So it's magnetical.
yes.
But on the other side, the sun also attracts because of its gravitational fields. That's why even the solar system we know is always coming back. That is a resistance. So when the magnetic ray goes out and it slows down to matter state, it creates electricity. Dus it creates EM, electromagnetic field forces. But that's a lower state. The neutron is bigger, so it attracts it again. And then that's why Mr. Cashy uses in his flashlight a multi-wire, nano-coated wires. And that can create light. Why? Because it's going from and returning back to. That resistance creates, in fact, the light in the nano coating. And the nano coating has no resistance anymore. It's timeless, dimensionless. So if you can make a connection, like when you said you put a copper wire on an aluminium dot, and it makes a connection, then the forces of the magnetic and electric field will flow in the direction where it needs to go. So a magnetic will flow to the north, and the gravitational will pull in from the south. That's why it's always conservative, how do you call it?
Conservation of energy.
Yes. That's the principle. One is matter plasma state and one is energy plasma state.
Okay. Very good. I know Mosfeq was trying to explain a little bit about the magnets. Thank you, Fo, but I always thought they were quite magical, Mosfeq, these little magnets, and they seem to have power within them as they pull or they repel. So that's always been something special to me.
Where does it come from? Where does it come from?
Yeah, I don't know.
None of our books talk about any of these things, but anyway. So let's look at it. You know, the little piece of iron that I drew at the bottom. It gets attracted to it. How does it happen? I mean, what is the mechanism actually happening within the magnet? How does the magnet become a magnet? We rub a magnet on a piece of iron and it turns into a magnet. Why? Why does it do it? This is a question I had. I mean, I asked them. I mean,
it transfers its fields.
Well, I mean, it's we have to look at things at a more fundamental level. If you look at the spin happens even at the atomic level. Now the iron, because of the condition of our planet, because we have an iron core on this planet, that's why the magnets we have on this planet won't work on a planet which doesn't have an iron core. So the reason what's the difference between a piece of iron and an iron that is a magnet?
But you have to remember, not only iron is a magnet, oxygen is also a magnet in plasma state. That's the difference between energy and matter state magnetic fields.
Right, and he wants us to understand both.
Yes. So let's go in step by step, because we have so when we bring a magnet close to a piece of iron, it develops its opposite pole. We can measure it, and then it gets attracted to the other one. So if I flip the top magnet around and put the south pole at the top and the north pole at the bottom, this will induce a south pole here. It's the opposite polarity it is inducing. A magnetical flow is creating a gravitational, inducing a gravitational, the opposite flow. So in a way, what happens is that we have to think in terms of each atom of iron. So what do they look like? Let's say we draw an iron. Let's call it let's make it blue and or gray, something like that, so that it's kind of like one of those. Now this has what? It has fields. It has rotation in it, and it has fields generation. It has a primary axis of rotation, just like our planet. So if let me just, I have to draw some lines. So it's kind of like these. You have these lines. I can make it skin. So I'm drawing the lines, but you're not seeing how I'm drawing it, but I'm drawing them. Let's not draw this. So I'll draw a few more. Oops. Draw a few more lines. So I'm drawing the magnetic field lines of each molecule of this piece of iron. Now, when we stack them up, I'm going to, oops. Okay, I want to do this. Wait, Oh, sorry, I made some mistake in my drawing. Try to fix that. All right. This I don't want. This is an accident. So it's just like the planet Earth. We have each molecule has the same kind of attributes, a magnetic field, North Pole, and all that. Now, what I'm going to do is copy a whole bunch of them together and stack them up. So when they're magnets, they're all aligned. When it's not a magnet or a piece of iron, what happens is that okay. So I'm going to change. So all of these, I'm doing it only in 2 dimensions, but they're not, in case of a normal iron, all these molecules are not aligned. They're not rotating in the same direction, but when it becomes a magnet, all of them becomes aligned. So there is in case of one atom, it's, let's say the top, if I take the top one, the flow from south to north is in this direction, from bottom to top. Here, because of the tilt, the flow is in this direction. And in this case, because of the tilt, it's flowing in this direction. When we create magnet, we align all of them together so that the south pole of all of these things, all of these atoms get aligned. So in the end, when we align all of these things, I'm just going to move the other piece of the other thing because I can't draw here. So when all of these are aligned, all these fields add up, and then we get the same condition like we see on magnets. We have these lines coming out, and it's the combined field of all of them together, aligned properly. They're all aligned in one way, one this way, one that.
Is this at all similar to what we're doing when we're elevating the souls, when we all are aligning our fields together collectively?
Yeah, the intention gets amplified when you align all the intention in one direction. Same thing. It's the magnetic field. When they're aligned, all these are adding up together to create the magnetic field of the whole magnet. When they're pointing in different directions, one supporting Trump, one supporting Biden, it doesn't work very well.
No power.
No power. Actually, it's not just one supporting Biden. Within the Biden government, every person has a different field pointing in different different directions.
We elevate their souls.
Yes. So you have to magnetically align all of these people. That's why we all do all this elevation. It's the same thing, really. So once we align the fields together, they become a powerful magnet. And then it can attract this piece of iron. which temporarily also gets aligned. So as we know, when somebody strong is present in a room, other people get pulled by that person because of the strong field. It's the same story. The magnet story is the same story as when we have people
Nice.
together. So now it's a very simple idea, but it's not mentioned. I mean, I don't know why it's not mentioned, because we don't understand magnetic field very well. Now that we do, all of these alignment is what's creating the magnet. And this alignment is the same thing we do when we nanocoat material. What do? We create a flow through these nanomaterial so that all of these fields get aligned. That's when it becomes a superconductor. It doesn't become a superconductor until we align the field by putting electricity on the nanowire. This is fundamental, very fundamental part of our understanding. We don't think about when we put it that's what makes it superconductor, because it's all aligned and you have a channel with no fields, interrupting in different ways, this way or that way. It's all aligned. So it's the magnet and our superconductors in the nanomaterial is the same thing. It's aligned field. So anyway, this is a fundamental thing. I'm talking about very fundamental things about our science which are missing, but which we can cover easily with our understanding in cosmos science. And so this is what I wanted to talk about. Now, so this magnet is inducing field in the piece of iron. So this inducing means creating the gravitational effect, just like we induced the gravitational field because of our magnetical field. Similarly, this magnet is inducing field in this iron, and which is creating the attraction. Now, this is only in matter state in the magnet. Nothing else. Very simple. The idea is very simple. Any school children can be taught this stuff. What I'm saying is nothing that groundbreaking in a way, but we just have to teach the kids. I mean, we don't teach them that the electron flows through wire. This kind of nonsense is, I mean, in every book we have now. So anyway, so this is very fundamental. Now, after knowing all this, can we come back to this rope experiment, which I talked about in the other class, the plasma reactor group. So with this understanding, it's much easier to understand how the rope creates the lift of the brick. In case people don't remember what I'm talking about, it's one of the experiments that Mr. Kesh suggested, is to hold a rope. Here is the hand holding a rope with a tennis ball in one end and a brick on the other end, and we rotate the tennis ball, and the brick goes up. It gets in the center along the axis axis of rotation. So this is an easy experiment anybody can do. And first thing people say is that it's because of centrifugal force. Really? The ball is much lighter. What is happening here? We have to understand this. Then we understand why this brick gets lifted. It's very fundamental. So once we start rotating the ball, it creates a field flow, which creates essentially a donut around the axis of rotation, around the circle of rotation. It forms a donut, and which has a rotation, if we are turning clockwise, which has a rotation like I showed with the red arrows around it. Now, it's happening in the fields. there is no matter state here. It's the, what do you call it, ether or magnetic field. It's in the magnetic field this kind of rotation is forming. So as a result of it, there is just like one of these atoms of this iron magnet. The same situation is happening here. And this flow is essentially the same flow. This is multiple arrows, actually, a number of arrows. So the resultant is that the whole brick gets lifted up. Sorry. So this is actually understanding of the magnet, understanding of the electricity flowing through the wire combined together, where the opposite field is getting induced in the magnetic field, not in matter state anymore. It's in the field. But it is because of the rotation of the ball that is inducing the field. Nothing else. There is no physical, what do you call it? Current flow. It's the field around the ball. Motion in the field. Motion in the, what do you call it, magnetic field that's creating this. And inducing the opposite effect.
How come my mind tells me to go back to the centrifugal force and that's what's lifting the brick?
No, centrifugal force is not lifting the brick.
Okay.
This is what, you know, so you are, think of this circle rotating. I drew this donut. So the donut is a rotating donut. Now, what is happening? There is a,
It's all around that line of travel, correct?
yeah, but the line, the ball is traveling around this circle, but the donut is also rotating. The lift is because of the donut, not the centrifugal force. It's in the field. The donut is the field that is in empty space, getting created. Just like the, think of this wire at the bottom. Make it circular. You have this same condition. And that's what's doing the lift. It's not the centrifugal force. It's the field that is getting generated here. This is, and we always come to the centrifugal force. Centrifugal force, it's not centrifugal force at all. So the thing is that we don't believe in ether because Michael Morley's experiment in 1890 something, 96 I think, proved that there is no ether, which was disproved in 1915 by another guy, and Michelson and some other guy in 1925 did an elegant experiment using, what do you call it, the rotation of the planet in one direction or in the opposite direction, and they showed that yes, the velocity of the light varies. But those came later, and they didn't get integrated to the general theory of relativity. So all of these things are royal mess, because the experiment on which the theory is based was later disproved by the same guy who did the original experiment. Can you believe that? But anyway, so the thing is that we don't believe in ether, so nobody thinks in terms of fields rotating in empty space. We talk about this when it comes to our electrical wire. Conveniently, it's available there because Tesla did it. So it's available there. But elsewhere, it's not available because some ancient experiment showed it, which was later disproved. So anyway, I don't want to get into too much of this political junk, but it's too many hoax going on and still exists in the books. Electron flows through wire, and that's why electricity flows. What a bunch of nonsense. But anyway, be that as it may, so this is a very simple way of looking at it. And but you have to go through the motion yourself. Otherwise, it will look like I'm doing some magic. But you have to think in terms of the field in empty space and its inducing field around it too. So it's much more complex than what I drew, but think of this donut. Let me take a copy of this circle and I will show what I mean by how complicated it gets. Because this is one of the reasons why we have difficulty understanding plasma, because how do you create a field of, let's say, a certain point in space within let's say, a galaxy? So how do you add detail to the galaxy? There's a field for the galaxy, but within the galaxy, there are details. So because of this rotation, the donut forms. Now, if we take, let's say, this circle of the donut, I'll make a copy of this circle. And I'll show that this is a rotating circle, okay? Because the whole donut is rotating. Now, if we bring a copy of this circle now here, actually this is also a rotate. This is a motion along the surface of the donut, but because of that, another field will get created. So which will be another donut. So it becomes a donut itself. I'll change the color in which it will get obvious. So now, if I pick this one, do it in a different color, and I'll also make this one blue. So this blue thing is a donut, and at the center of this, there is the flow that's on the surface of this donut. So this circle also creates another donut. So there is a donut around this, which again creates another donut. So you go into further detail. So field can be on top of fields. More detail comes into play. I'm not sure I'm making it understandable, but you have to think in terms of field within field within field within field.
Right. We haven't thought this way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's why, we have detail. You have the galaxy. Within galaxy, there is smaller system like, star cluster. Beyond star clusters, there are solar systems, then there are planets and people and all that. So field within field within field. And all of these are in motion. And at every level, the motion gets reduced. And Mr. Kesh talked about this motion at universal level. The motion gets faster and faster. As you scale up, the motion gets faster and faster. Anyway, so as we understand these things, we can actually control the fields to our heart's content. And so anyway, I'll leave it at that. I will entertain some questions, although, especially the last part requires our individual exercise of our mind to understand. I covered the basic, but all of us have to go through this whole material in their own way, because my language is not the way everybody thinks. I can only give you the sort of like the basic idea, but then you have to work through all the details. And it's not that difficult to understand. For example, magnet was easier to understand, but now think of this magnet, all the things I talk regarding magnets is also think in terms of circular motion or spherical motion, and then it will get cleared up. So, and donuts and all that kind of things. So I hope things make sense, at least a little bit.
Definitely a new perspective in a way. Who's going to rewrite all these books? I mean,
Mm.
this is going to be a
Yeah.
monumental task in itself, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of resistance, especially
Yeah,
the bestsellers.
I don't think we're going to rewrite books. It will be on YouTube and everybody will listen to YouTube videos. I mean, so one of these meetings and done in a more, I mean, sort of like in a measured way, I think. I mean, I can explain these to kids more readily than, people who are trained in our universities,
Right.
because they think ether does not exist, and they always quote Michelson-Morley's experiment, but you can always show them reference that here is this Michelson-Morley's experiment is incorrect. So is general theory of relativity. And now all these
So it may make them more arrogant initially, but in the end, they become more humble when they start to understand the process of creation.
experimental evidence are there. I mean, thing is that it's there.
Thank you. I think Alex is in the starting gate, and I know you have a class, and but feel free. You can take the beginning of the teaching if you'd like, or part of it to again bring an example. Feel free. We'll work it out. Thank you, Mosfek. Again, as Rick said, as Mr. Kesh said, go back to basics. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really, it's in the basics. All right.
Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you. I think Alex is in the starting gate, and I know you have a class, and but feel free. You can take the beginning of the teaching if you'd like, or part of it to again bring an example. Feel free. We'll work it out.
I want to thank everybody for allowing me to present. It's getting late in the day, and it was a wonderful session. It's really nice to hear other voices. That's what we need.
Yes.
And it's truly wonderful. We can all contribute, and we've seen how after we started. When do we start? 4 years ago, and that's nothing compared to what Rick Crammond has done and what Mr. Kesh has done, right? So, and the conventional inertia means that an energy and a force will continue until it's met by an equal and opposite energy force. That's the conventional knowledge of inertia. And for me, it's been 34 years that inertia has been flowing. And now we have a new meaning of the word inertia, the combination of fields coming together. And as we all come together, that inertia field is going to get stronger. Thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else? Randy says, today's teaching is a lot to absorb.
Oh, Randy.
So if we were, go ahead.
You know more than you know. Sorry, carry on, Mark.
No, I was going to say, so if we were at this position as souls, where the earth is, and maybe the earth is here and the earth isn't, but let's say it didn't have any inertia. Could we see each other, or because there's no other field to interact with, we would appear invisible to each other without that inertia to see in the matter state, the manifestation? We might be able to feel it in the energy state, but without inertia, there's no, apparently to me at this point, there is no physical manifestation. As we see the energy coming from the sun, we don't see it until it interacts with the fields of this planet, and then we see the light. So if we were souls in this position and there wasn't any inertia on this planet, would we be able to see each other? I'm sure we can sense each other, feel each other, and the energy, but there would be no physicality to be able to manifest.
Okay.
Just a thought.
No, you've answered the question that I put forward. The thing is, you're differentiating between manifestation, inertia, and seeing. And so the seeing is one of the senses. So all of the senses work as a, shall we say, as an inertia field. Okay, let's find a good word for it. An inertia field manifestation. So if you touch something, that is an acknowledgement of an inertia field manifestation. If you see something, it's the same. If you have a glass of water and you drink it, that is an inertia manifestation of the water. So if energy is flowing and you can't see it, and you say it has to be an inertia field because it is flowing, and pretty much all of us have cell phones, and when you touch that screen, somehow the energy from the tip of your finger goes into the phone. That energy is inertia in motion. And the inertia in motion is an energy field. So it's not an exclusion of saying inertia in physicality or an inertia in plasma state or as an energy state. It's like saying car. So you're not saying if it's a four-wheel car or if it's a pickup truck or it's a SUV. So each of us has an inertia manifestation of an image. And if we want to be more specific, it's a blue car. It's a blue two-door sports car. Now, how has the image manifestation changed? It's more specific, isn't it? So the point I'm trying to make is that each manifestation must have a magnetical gravitational field in order for it to be an inertia field. And so each field is an inertia field. That's the point. That's the teaching that MOSFEC was teaching today. And so therefore, that field is within another field. Well, that field is also an inertia field. Now, if you, as an inertia field, want to recognize that inertia field through one of your sensory organs, which is touch, taste, feel, smell, right? Or vision, or with the ears to hear, right? And then you find, things change because of your interaction. And you know that is true. You know that is true because you have a favorite song. And if I say you have a favorite song, that favorite song is an inertia field, and each of us has in our mental construct a song which is classified as a favorite song. And I guarantee you it's not the same song. So each of us has our own favorite song. But, if I name the artist and if I name the song, or even if I don't know the name, if I hum the tune, then you will all click in and say, oh, I can draw that from my memory, or I can draw that from an emotional moment that I had, and you can create an inertia field from that. And this is what we're trying to say. So without that magnetical gravitational balance, it doesn't exist. And it's just like your radio. You don't turn on the radio Does that mean the music is not there? No, the music is there. There's an inertia field between the station that's providing and the receivers that are receiving. You're not tuned in. You don't hear it, so it doesn't exist to you. But it does exist. And when you tune in, guess what? That inertia field of that music comes in contact with your inertia field of your sensory construct and creates an inertia field of music that you hear. And you know that that is potent because, like they say, like Shweta likes to clap and dance. And why not? As it makes her happy. And when Shweta is happy, laughing and smiling and giggling, don't we all do the same?
It is contagious, yes.
And that contagion is an inertia field. So that was an excellent example that you brought up, Mark, and thank you very much. And I'll let you finish off the program here.
All right.